Well, hey guys, it's Spiffyguy. I'm back here with another episode of food. And as you can see, I've got the Dehydrator out again. I'm on a dehydrating kick. I'm getting a lot of stuff ready for the fall hiking and backpacking season. So on this episode, we've got another tool we're going to use. This is a jerky gun. And as you probably could tell from the title and the fact that there's a jerky gun, we're making jerky. So why should we make jerky? Well, there's a lot of reasons why you should make your own jerky. One of which is probably has less junk in it than the stuff in the store. I'm actually going to be using prepackaged cured spices because that's what I have, a couple different flavors, and we'll talk about that as we go. But there's plenty of recipes online that you can use to make your own flavoring mix, and it's just a lot better for you to make it your own. I'm going to be using turkey instead of beef, mainly because the turkey was on sale. It was on sale for $3 a pound versus like $6.50 for the ground beef. So by buying ground turkey, I got 5 packs, which is 5 pounds, and I spent $15 on it. When you compare that to beef jerky that's in the store, where you're going to pay about $5 to $6 for anything from a 2 to 3 ounce package. So it's definitely a bit more economical as well. So what do we got going on? I have 5 trays in here. I'm hoping I can get all 5 pounds in there. Keep in mind that when you make things in the dehydrator, they shrink. So you're probably going to lose a third or a half of your size as far as your beef jerky. I think they say a pound makes about 1/3 of a pound when it's all said and done and jerkified. So it's super easy. Let's flip the camera around and we'll get things rolling. All right, guys, let's talk turkey about the materials that we're going to need to get rolling on this. Well, first thing we're going to need is our ground meat. Like I said, I'm using turkey because it was on sale. You could use ground beef. Just make sure to get the leanest that you can. That's the big thing, is you want a really low fat content. You could use strips of meat as well, and I think you can get the butcher to cut the strips. But part of the reason why I'm using the ground meat is, one, it was cheaper, and two, it's a little bit easier to eat, especially in the winter months when it would get cold. And you can also crumble it up and use it in cooking as well as just sort of like a flavored ground meat. So you can use what you want. It's your food. But to get rolling, we're going to need a bowl and some sort of stirring mechanism. You can use your hands as well. That's probably really good. Just keep in mind you're working with raw meat here, so let's follow some little safety. You're going to need another bowl over here to mix up your jerky mix. The jerky mix consists of a cure packet and a flavor packet. When I bought the Nesco Professional, it came with a few of these. These are just an original flavor jerky spice. They're not bad, so we're going to do one of those. And then we're going to use, I've got a cracked pepper and garlic. I've got a teriyaki and a hot and spicy. I believe that these came with the jerky gun, although I may have bought them separately. The jerky gun that I have here, I bought at Bass Pro. It was just like a little kit, and it does have a couple different size nozzles, so we can get the strip type jerky as well as the stick type jerky. So we may mess around with that. We're going to need a spoon to load up our gun. Once we're ready to roll, we'll put the nozzle on. We'll mix up our jerky cure and mix it with the ground beef itself, and then we'll load all of our meat into here and then stick it up on the plunger here. And just like a caulk gun, you're going to kind of squeeze it on out into your strips. Now, I did put down the mesh trays because the ground meat is going to be softer. It's going to be a little bit easier on the mesh trays. I only have 4 mesh trays. So for the 5th tray, I went ahead and cut the parchment paper in the circular little wheel like we did on one of the other ones. I believe it was the dal recipe. So I've babbled long enough. I'm gonna go ahead and mix my cure up in my little bowl here. I'm gonna get my meat in here, sprinkle the cure on top of the meat as I mix it up. And I'm gonna do 1 pound at a time and start loading the trays. All right guys, so that took a little bit of time. I've got it all arranged out here. Make sure to label your trays if you're doing different flavors so you know what flavor is what. Luckily I have the 2 different nozzles, so on trays that would have more than one flavor I could switch and then designate what's what. I think if you're using the little round sausage makers, you're going to get more material per tray. I think the slabs kind of, because they're a little bit harder to line up, they take up a little bit more space. So I only ended up getting 4 pounds worth of material on here, but I did get 4 different flavors. So fairly stoked about that. I'm going to set it to 160 is the setting on the dehydrator that I'm going to use. All right guys, so we're at about 2.5 hours or so in the dehydrator at 160 degrees Fahrenheit. You can see some of the pieces have started to shrink up a little bit. They're also sort of bleeding out a little bit of fats and oils. Here, let me zoom in for you, kind of give you an idea here. So what you can do is you can go ahead and take a paper towel and just sort of gently soak up some of that grease. It'll help it dehydrate a little bit faster, at least in my opinion. And you know, it just, that way it's not so greasy. The turkey isn't as fat filled and oily as regular ground beef. So I also like to rotate my trays, you know, so every hour and a half or so, you know, I like to just change the order just to make sure that they're getting a nice even temperature. And just to make sure for food safety aspect, at the end of all of this, we'll go ahead and stick it in the oven for about 10 minutes on 275. I've seen a lot of recipes that mention doing this at the end. So once you're done dehydrating, I'll move all the stuff to a cookie sheet and then with parchment paper on it and just stick it in the oven for 10 minutes. That way, I mean, we're not really cooking it, we're just kind of sealing it at the end, so to speak, and making sure it gets up to a good temperature for meat food safety. So I'm gonna quickly dab this stuff off and stick it back underneath the dehydrator because I don't want it to cool down too much, because that will extend my dehydrating time. All right guys, so this is what we ended up with here. After 6.5 hours in the dehydrator at 160 degrees Fahrenheit, and then 10 minutes in the oven at 275. You want to be careful on that 10 minutes because you will crisp up the edges a little bit. So just be careful here. I'll give you an idea. This is, you can see here, it's a little hard on the edges. And this one, it definitely breaks a little bit. The sticks came out pretty decent. They're not moist at all. They're still chewy. Now they were a little greasy coming out of the oven, and I patted them down. Another thing that I did is at about the 4-hour mark, I flipped everything over, and the one set that I had on parchment paper, it had hardened up enough that I could remove the parchment paper. So just a little note there. So what I'm going to do is let these just cool for you know, a few more minutes just to make sure they're nice and cool. I'll bag them up and then I'm going to weigh it because I'm curious to know how much I made, and maybe I'll have to sample one of these too. All right guys, so there you go. That is making turkey jerky in the dehydrator. It's a pretty simple process. It just takes a long time. I've done beef jerky before. I don't remember how it came out. I remember I had to pat it down like I did with paper towel to get kind of the grease off. So definitely make sure that you're doing that. I would probably flip and rotate, you know, trays and flip the pieces as it goes along. Especially when you take them out of the oven, make sure that you get all that grease off there. As far as storage, my plan is to put these in the freezer. So I'm using freezer bags. Make sure to label them, like what flavor, what it is, and make sure to put the date on there. And that way you're not worried about, you know, whether it's from 3 years ago or not. As far as how long these will keep, I don't know. I'm using them in the freezer to extend that longevity. If you didn't want to, you could probably just put them in the fridge, that sort of thing. I made quite a bit here, so let's weigh it all out. So remember, I started with 4 pounds of raw meat, and I have a total of 1.9 pounds, which comes out to 30.5 ounces. Okay, and so if looking at the store, it was $5 for a little 2-ounce package. So there you go. You think about how much money I saved. I spent $12 total on the turkey. The dehydrator I had, it came with the flavorings, but you can also buy the flavorings, but it's not that expensive. So I've tried the original. The original was pretty tasty. This is one of the cracked pepper sticks. It's pretty good. Can definitely taste the pepper in that one. I tried one of the hot and spices earlier, and they definitely have a kick. And you could use this when you go out in the field. You could crumble it up, cut it up into small bits, and throw it into, you know, a stew, a beef flavored ramen, that sort of thing. And not only will you get some extra protein in there, but you'll get a little bit of a kick from whatever the flavoring is that's on there. This is the teriyaki. Pretty good flavor. Definitely, the consistency is good. It's not too chewy, it's not too dry, but it doesn't seem overly moist. I think really the big thing to worry about would be the greasiness of it, and that's where it comes in, where you're using a low fat. If you are going to use beef, make sure to get the lowest fat content you can. I think out of all of them so far that I've tried, I think the hot and spicy has probably the best taste, followed by the original. I think the teriyaki and the cracked pepper are good as well, but out of all of them, I think the hot and spicy is the winner. So anyway, it's definitely economical to do it yourself. So hopefully this has spurred somebody to go out and try it themselves. There's a lot of stuff you can do with a dehydrator. I hope to adventure more into that because you know, hiking season is coming up, and even just having a snack, you know, like you can dehydrate apples, that sort of thing. I did zucchini last week, and you know, those bites are going to be super tasty out on a hike or just around the house for, you know, something to snack on. So anyway, I think I've babbled long enough here, you know, so go out and try it yourself. If you have any questions or comments, go ahead and post them below. And if you like this sort of stuff, give me a thumbs up. That way I know what sort of content folks like. And be sure to check out the Facebook page, you know, where I post things occasionally and have good conversations there. So anyway, just remember that life's an adventure, and go out and have one with your homemade beef jerky. All right, boys and girls, let's talk turkey here, about what we need for making our whatever it is that we're making. What are we making? The bottoms are pretty greasy too, so maybe one of those things where you move them onto a plate that has a there is that clock again. Seriously, always with the clock. It always goes off. It's so annoying.